The wagon wheels groaned against frozen earth as Clara Whitmore pressed deeper into the Colorado wilderness. November 1883 had arrived with teeth, and the first snows already dusted the pine-covered slopes like flour on a widow's black dress. She'd left Denver 3 days prior, hiring a taciturn driver who asked no questions about why a woman of her apparent breeding sought refuge in the mountains with winter approaching. The cabin appeared through the trees like a broken promise, walls leaning drunkenly, roof half-caved from seasons of snow, windows nothing but dark holes staring blindly at the forest. Old Samuel Hutchins, the hermit who owned it, barely glanced at her morning attire before naming his price. Too high for such a ruin, but Clara paid without haggling. Money meant little now. Privacy meant everything. "Won't last the winter," the driver muttered as he unloaded her few possessions. 2 trunks, a rocking chair that had been her mother's, and a small iron stove she'd purchased in town. Not alone. Clara pulled her black wool shawl tighter. "I've survived worse." The lie came easily. She'd never survived anything harder than her husband's sermons running long on Sunday mornings. Until 2 months ago. Until that night when everything changed. The driver left without looking back, and Clara stood alone before her new home. The sun was already falling behind the mountains, painting the snow crimson. She had perhaps an hour of light to make the place livable. Rolling up her sleeves, a scandal back in civilization. But who would see her here? She set to work. The interior was worse than expected. Pack rats had made nests in the corners. Wind whistled through gaps in the chinking between logs. The fireplace, at least, seemed sound. She built a fire with wood left by some previous occupant, then unpacked her few supplies. Cornmeal, salt pork, dried beans, tea, enough for a month if she was careful. After that, she'd need to make the journey to Pine Ridge, the nearest settlement. That first night, she slept fitfully on a pallet near the fire, her deceased husband's Winchester rifle within reach. Every sound, wind, settling wood, creatures moving outside, made her start. But morning came, and with it a kind of grim satisfaction. She had survived. She would continue surviving. The days blurred together in a rhythm of necessity. Patch the roof before the real snows came. Haul water from the stream a quarter-mile away. Gather firewood. Learn which berries the early frost hadn't claimed. She worked until her soft hands blistered and bled. Until her back ached constantly. Until exhaustion drove out thought. Pine Ridge lay 8 miles through the forest, following what passed for a road. Clara made the journey once a week, always wearing her black dress and the mourning veil that concealed her face. The townspeople, miners, trappers, a few merchants, their worn wives, watched her with curiosity shading into suspicion. A widow, clearly, but whose? And why here, of all places? "That's the Hutchins place she's taken," she heard the shopkeeper's wife whisper. No good Christian woman would live alone so far from town. Clara kept her head down, purchased her necessities, and left. Let them wonder, let them gossip. Their speculation couldn't be worse than the truth. The truth, even now. She could barely face it. Her husband, Reverend Thomas Whitmore, pillar of the community, shepherd of souls. The bruises had always been carefully placed, hidden beneath high collars and long sleeves. His explanations were smooth as oil. She was clumsy, prone to falling, and who would believe otherwise? He spoke for God, after all. But that night, that final night when she'd found him with the Hensley girl, barely 15, in the vestry, Clara forced the memory down. The past was buried, like Thomas himself. She had sworn at his graveside to remain faithful to his memory, to never remarry, to live out her days in pious widowhood. The congregation had wept at her devotion. If they only knew. 3 weeks into her mountain exile, the snows began in earnest. Clara had thought herself prepared, but nothing could have readied her for the weight of that silence. Snow muffled every sound until the world seemed wrapped in cotton. Days passed when she saw nothing living save the smoke from her own chimney. It was during such a storm that she found the fox. The creature lay twisted in a trap just beyond her woodpile, its elegant red body marred by the cruel teeth of iron jaws. It should have been dead. The trap looked days old, but as Clara approached, one amber eye opened and fixed on her with startling intelligence. "Oh, you poor thing." She'd seen Thomas set such traps around their chicken coop. The memory of how to open them came back slowly. The fox watched her struggle with the spring mechanism, too exhausted to even bare its teeth. When the jaws finally released, the animal collapsed into the snow, breathing shallowly. Clara knew she should leave it. Wild things rarely survived human kindness, but something in that resigned gaze moved her. She fetched an old blanket and carefully wrapped the fox, carrying it inside, by her fire. She could see the damage, a badly mangled rear leg, infected and swollen. The fox should be put out of its misery. Thomas would have fetched his gun immediately. Instead, Clara heated water and cleaned the wound as best she could, tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. The fox endured her ministrations without protest, that uncanny gaze never leaving her face. "I don't know why I'm doing this," she told it. "You'll probably die anyway, or bite me for my trouble." But the fox only closed its eyes and slept. She made it a bed near the hearth and left it water and some scraps of salt pork. When she woke the next morning, both were gone, and the fox lay watching her again with those knowing eyes. 3 days it stayed. 3 days of Clara talking to it as she went about her chores, surprised by how much she'd missed the sound of a voice, even her own. She told the fox about her fears, her loneliness, her guilt. It listened with the patience of a confessor. On the 4th morning, she woke to find the door ajar and the fox gone. Only a faint depression in the blanket showed it had ever been there at all. Clara stood in the doorway, looking out at the pristine snow, and felt oddly bereft. Even a wounded fox, it seemed, wouldn't stay with her. She was gathering firewood that evening when she sensed it, that prickle of awareness that meant she was being watched. Clara turned slowly, hand moving to the knife at her belt. Nothing, only the trees and the falling snow. But the feeling persisted as she hurried inside and barred the door. That night, she dreamed of amber eyes in the darkness. The storm worsened over the following days. Clara's woodpile dwindled faster than anticipated. On the 5th day, she had no choice but to venture out. Despite the howling wind and near whiteout conditions, she made it barely 100 yards before realizing her mistake. The familiar landmarks had vanished beneath the snow. Even her own footprints filled instantly. Panic rose in her throat. Stories of settlers found frozen mere feet from their doors flashed through her mind. She turned back, or what she thought was back, and stumbled forward. Time lost meaning in that white void. Her feet went numb. Her hands, even in thick mittens, burned with cold. When she fell, she almost didn't get up. How easy it would be to simply lie here, to let the snow cover her like a clean white shroud. No more guilt, no more lies, no more pretending to mourn a monster. But something made her struggle to her feet. Pride, perhaps, or simple animal stubbornness. She staggered on, and suddenly there was darkness ahead. Trees. She'd made it to the forest edge, but which direction was home? That's when she smelled it. Wood smoke, so faint she might have imagined it. But she followed that thread of warmth like a lifeline. Through the trees, stumbling, falling, rising again, until she saw the impossible, a light, but not her cabin. This was larger, built of proper hewn logs, with a stone chimney releasing that blessed smoke. Her frozen hands could barely work the door latch. She half fell inside, bringing a swirl of snow with her. "Close the door!" The voice was deep, rough as bark. Clara shoved the door shut and turned. He stood by the fireplace, and for a moment she thought the cold had driven her mad. No man could be so large and yet move so quietly. He was dressed in buckskins and fur, dark hair falling past his shoulders, face half shadowed but for the glint of eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I'm sorry," Clara managed through chattering teeth. "I was lost. The storm." "I know." 2 words, but they stopped her babbling. He moved then, and she saw his face fully, weathered, scarred, with a kind of hard beauty that spoke of survival against odds. Not a white man, not fully, not Indian either. Something between, belonging to neither world. Sit. He gestured to a chair by the fire. Before you lose those fingers. Clara obeyed, too cold to argue. He brought her a cup of something hot, tea, though it tasted of pine and stranger things. Her hands shook too badly to hold it steady. And without a word, he knelt and wrapped his own hands around hers, steadying the cup. His touch was warm. Too warm. Clara jerked back, spilling tea across her frozen skirts. I should go. In this? He glanced toward the door, where wind shrieked like a living thing. You'd be dead in minutes. The truth of it settled over her like lead. She was trapped here with this stranger until the storm passed. This man who looked at her with eyes that seemed to see too much. My name is Clara, she offered, trying for normalcy. Clara Whitmore. I've taken the Hutchins cabin for the winter. He studied her for a long moment. Elias Crow. Mr. Crow, thank you, for the shelter. A smile ghosted across his features. Not mockery, exactly, but something close. Just Elias, and you're welcome. Widow Whitmore. The title made her flinch. He noticed, of course he noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he moved to a corner and began laying out blankets and furs. You'll sleep here tonight. Storm should break by morning. I couldn't possibly. Where else? That almost smile again. I don't bite, usually. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. That's not, I merely meant. I know what you meant. He turned away, giving her privacy to remove her wet outer garments. There's stew in the pot. Eat if you're hungry. She was starving, she realized. The stew was simple. Venison, wild onions, roots she couldn't identify, but it tasted like salvation. As she ate, she studied her surroundings. The cabin was sparse but clean. Weapons hung on the walls, rifles, traps, knives of various sizes. A bearskin served as a rug. Books, surprisingly, filled a rough shelf. You can read? The question escaped before she could stop it. Elias looked up from whatever he was mending by the fire, disappointed. No, I only meant that a half-breed mountain man shouldn't have letters. His tone was mild, but she heard the edge beneath. The missionaries who raised me said it would civilize me. Another ghost smile. Didn't take. Clara focused on her stew, cheeks burning. Every word out of her mouth seemed wrong. In her world, her former world, she'd known exactly what to say, how to act. Here, she was lost in more ways than one. I'm sorry, she said quietly. That was rude of me. Was it? He seemed genuinely curious, or just honest. She had no answer for that. The storm raged through the night. Clara lay wakeful on her pallet, acutely aware of Elias's presence across the room. He slept, or seemed to, but something told her he'd wake at the slightest threat. Like a wolf, she thought. Dangerous, but not immediately threatening. When morning came, the storm had indeed broken. Weak sunlight filtered through the windows, revealing a world transformed. Drifts reached halfway up the walls. I'll walk you back, Elias said. Already dressed and ready? Clara wanted to refuse, to maintain some fiction of independence. But the snow was deep, the path uncertain. She nodded. They made slow progress through the drifts. Elias moved ahead, breaking trail, while Clara followed in his footsteps. Neither spoke. When her cabin finally came into view, she felt equal parts relief and something else. Disappointment. Thank you, she said at her door. I owe you my life. You owe me nothing. He studied her with those two knowing eyes. But be more careful. The mountain doesn't forgive foolishness. He turned to go, then paused. That fox you helped saw you with it. Clara started. You were watching? I watch everything in my territory. No apology in it, just fact. Not many would waste kindness on a dying animal. It wasn't kindness, Clara said. I couldn't leave it. No, Elias agreed. You couldn't. He left then, disappearing into the trees as quietly as he'd appeared in her life. Clara went inside and barred the door, hands trembling, but not from cold. That night, she found a haunch of venison hung by her door. No note, No sign of who'd left it, but she knew. It was the beginning of something. What? She couldn't say. But as she lay in her narrow bed, Clara found herself thinking not of her dead husband or her vows or her guilt, but of amber eyes and scarred hands wrapped around hers. Outside, snow began to fall again. The venison lasted a week. Clara found herself rationing it not from need, but from a strange reluctance to see it gone. Each morning, she checked her door. Though she told herself she was merely inspecting the weather, nothing appeared. No footprints marked the snow, yet somehow she knew he was out there, moving through the forest like smoke. She tried to return to her routines. Water, firewood, mending, but concentration eluded her. She'd find herself staring out the window, searching the tree line. Once, she could have sworn she saw the movement, a shadow too large to be deer, but when she looked again, nothing. "You're being foolish," she told herself, attacking a pile of kindling with unnecessary force. "He's just a man, a stranger who helped you once." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Elias Crow was something else, something that didn't fit into the neat categories of her former life. 2 weeks passed before she found the next gift, a brace of rabbits, cleaned and ready for the pot. This time, there were tracks, large boots, the stride of a tall man. They led to her door and away again, disappearing where the forest began. Clara stood in the snow, rabbits in hand, fighting an absurd urge to follow those tracks. Instead, she went inside and made stew, using the last of her vegetables. That night, she left a portion on her doorstep, covered against the cold. It was gone by morning. So began a strange dance. Gifts would appear, fresh meat, firewood already split. Once a handful of winter berries sweet as summer. Clara would leave something in return. Cornbread, when she could spare the meal. Or tea brewed strong and black. Never did they meet, never did she see him. But she felt his presence like heat from a distant fire. The settlement at Pine Ridge noticed the change. "You're looking well, Mrs. Whitmore," the shopkeeper's wife observed, eyes sharp with curiosity. "The mountain air must agree with you." Clara murmured something noncommittal, keeping her face hidden beneath her veil. But she knew what the woman saw. Her cheeks had lost their hollow look. Her hands, though still rough from work, moved with new strength. She no longer hunched beneath the weight of her mourning clothes. "Terrible about that Fletcher boy," the woman continued. "Fishing. Attacked by a bear, they say. Though funny, no bear tracks near the body." Clara's hands stilled on the bolt of cloth she'd been examining. "Attacked? Oh yes, James Fletcher. You wouldn't know him. Wild young man. Always drinking and causing trouble. They found him on the mountain road. Torn up something awful." The woman leaned closer. "Though between you and me, I heard he'd been bothering the Hewitt girl, following her home from church, making improper suggestions. Perhaps the Lord works in mysterious ways." A chill ran down Clara's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. She made her purchases quickly and left, but the story followed her home. James Fletcher. She'd seen him once in town, weaving drunkenly down the street, making crude remarks to passing women. Now he was dead, killed by something that left no bear tracks. That night, she didn't leave food by the door. The next morning brought fresh snow and, with it, a discovery that made her heart race. Firewood, as usual, stacked neat by her door, but pressed into the snow beside it, clear as writing, the print of a fox's paw. Clara knelt, tracing the delicate mark with one gloved finger. A message? A signature? Or simply coincidence? When she looked up, Elias stood at the forest edge. Her breath caught. He made no move to approach, just watched her with those unreadable eyes. Man and woman regarded each other across the white expanse, neither speaking. Then Clara did something that surprised them both. She raised her hand in greeting. He tilted his head, considering, then turned and melted back into the trees. But something had shifted. The next day, she found him splitting wood behind her cabin when she returned from the stream. He didn't acknowledge her approach, just continued his work with economical precision. Clara went inside, brewed tea, and brought out 2 cups. "Thank you," she said, setting one on the chopping block. He paused mid-swing. "For?" "The firewood, the meat, all of it. Someone should look after you." The words hung between them, weighted with meanings neither would examine. Clara sipped her tea, watching him work. The scars on his hands were more visible in daylight. Old wounds that spoke of violence survived. "Did you know James Fletcher?" The question escaped before wisdom could stop it. Elias's axe came down, splitting a log clean through. "Everyone knew Fletcher. He's dead." "Yes." Clara waited, but he offered nothing more. The silence stretched until she couldn't bear it. "They say a bear killed him. They say a lot of things." He set another log in place. "Most of them lies." "But you know the truth?" He stopped then, really looked at her. Something in his gaze made her want to step back, but she held her ground. "Truth is a luxury for people who can afford it," he said quietly. "The rest of us just survive." He finished the wood and left without another word. But the next day, he was back. And the next, never staying long, rarely speaking. But his presence became part of her routine. Clara told herself she was being practical. The wood needed splitting. The roof needed patching before the next storm. A woman alone needed help. All perfectly reasonable lies. December arrived with bitter cold. Clara's supplies dwindled faster than expected. The trip to Pine Ridge became treacherous, the road often impassable. On one such attempt, her horse, a sorry nag she'd bought cheap, slipped on ice and went lame. She was examining the animal's leg, fighting despair, when Elias appeared. "Can't ride him," he said after a brief inspection. "Not for weeks." "I know." Clara's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Without the horse, she couldn't reach town. Without reaching town, she'd starve before spring. "Come on." He took the horse's reins. "I'll stable him at my place. He'll better there." "But, you planning to freeze to death arguing?" She followed him through the forest, seeing paths she'd never noticed. His cabin, when they reached it, had a small lean-to stable with 2 horses already in residence. He settled her nag with practiced care, talking low to calm the frightened animal. "He'll be fine," Elias said, leading her back outside. "Question is, will you?" Clara lifted her chin. "I'll manage." "With what food? What supplies?" His tone was harsh, but she heard concern beneath it. "Storm coming. Could be weeks before the road clears." "Then I'll hunt." That almost smile again. "You ever killed anything bigger than a chicken?" "I can learn." "Before you starve? Before you freeze?" He shook his head. "Stubborn woman." "I'm not going back to town." The words came out fiercer than intended. "Not to stay. Never to stay." Something shifted in his expression. "Running from something? Aren't we all?" They stood there, the truth unspoken between them. "Finally." Elias sighed. "I'll bring supplies, enough to last the winter." "I can't pay." "Didn't ask for pay." He turned away. "Stay alive. That's payment enough." Over the following days, he made good on his promise. Sacks of cornmeal and flour appeared. Salt pork, dried beans, even precious coffee and sugar. More than supplies, he brought knowledge. How to read weather signs, where to find edible plants beneath the snow, how to set snares for small game. "Why?" Clara asked one afternoon as he showed her how to skin a rabbit. "Why help me?" His hands never paused in their work. "You helped the fox." That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get. But she began to understand anyway, in his careful teaching, in the way he noticed when her woodpile ran low, in how he always stayed just far enough away to be proper. He was as lonely as she was, perhaps lonelier. The settlement barely tolerated him. The native tribes wouldn't claim him. He existed between worlds, belonging to neither. Like her, now, neither widow nor wife, neither respectable nor fallen, just surviving in the spaces between. One evening, as they sat by her fire, he'd taken to staying later, Though still maintaining careful distance, Clara found herself talking about Kansas, about her sister, about everything except what mattered. "She writes every week," Clara said, holding her latest letter, "begging me to come home. Says I'm being foolish, that a woman needs protection." Protection? Elias's voice was flat. From what? From the world. From impropriety. From ourselves. The words tasted bitter. That's what they taught us. What I believed. Until... She stared into the fire. Until I learned that the greatest danger can come from those sworn to protect you. Silence fell. When she glanced at him, Elias was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "He hurt you?" Not a question. Clara's hand went unconsciously to her throat, where high collars had hidden so many bruises. "It doesn't matter now. It matters." 2 words, soft as snow, dangerous as avalanche. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, crack, like ice beginning to thaw. "I should make more tea," she said, standing too quickly. He caught her wrist, gently, so gently she could have pulled away. She didn't. "It matters," he repeated. "You matter." Clara couldn't breathe. His thumb rested against her pulse, and she knew he felt it racing. This was wrong, improper, dangerous. She was a widow in mourning. He was a stranger, a man of mixed blood, someone the town already whispered about. She didn't care, but Elias released her, standing in one fluid motion. "I should go. Storm coming." He was out the door before she could respond, leaving her standing by the fire, wrist still warm from his touch. The storm he'd predicted arrived that night with fury. Clara lay wakeful, listening to wind batter her walls. She thought of Elias in his cabin, wondered if he slept or if he, too, stared into darkness, thinking forbidden thoughts. Near dawn, she woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world muffled in new snow. She dressed quickly, needing air, needing movement, needing something she couldn't name. The fox waited by her door. It sat neat as a cat, red coat stark against white snow. The same fox. She recognized the slight limp, the intelligent gaze. It watched her emerge, then rose and trotted toward the forest, pausing to look back. An invitation. Clara didn't hesitate. She followed the fox through trees heavy with snow, along paths she'd never seen. The creature moved slowly, accommodating her clumsy human pace, deeper into the forest, where shadows held blue mysteries and silence rang like bells. Finally, they emerged into a clearing. The fox sat, curling its brush around its feet, and waited. Elias stood on the far side, still as the trees. He looked different here, in his element, wild, beautiful, dangerous, everything she'd been taught to fear. "You came," he said. "The fox knows what I know." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Sees what I see." "And what's that?" He stopped just beyond reach. "A woman trying so hard to be dead, she's forgotten how to live." The words hit like physical blows. Clara's knees nearly buckled. "How dare you? When did you last smile? Really smile, not the mask you wear to town." Another step. "When did you last want something? Need something? Let yourself feel anything beyond duty and guilt? Stop. I smell it on you. Fear, sorrow, shame." Closer now. "But underneath there's fire. Banked, hidden, but burning." "Stop!" He did, immediately. They stood in the snow-bright clearing, both breathing hard. The fox watched with ancient eyes. "I know what it is to live between worlds," Elias said quietly. "To be neither one thing nor another. To have the life you knew torn away and have to build another from nothing." He held out his hand. "I see you. Clara Whitmore. Not the widow, not the mask. You." Clara stared at his outstretched hand. Scarred, strong, offering something she couldn't name but desperately wanted. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't or won't? Both, neither." Tears she'd held back for months threatened to fall. "I don't know anymore." "Then let me know for both of us." The fox rose, stretched, and trotted back into the forest. Its work, apparently, was done. Clara took a shaking breath, took a step forward, took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. Neither moved beyond that, just stood, hand in hand, as snow began to fall again. "There's something I need to tell you," Clara said. "About my husband. About how he died. Later," Elias said. "When you're ready. When the words don't cut you to speak them." "How do you know they cut?" "Because I recognize the scars." He walked her home as snow fell thicker. At her door, he raised her hand to his lips, a gesture so gentle, so at odds with his wild appearance, that it nearly undid her. "This is impossible," she said. "Most things worth having are." He left her there, disappearing into the white. Clara went inside, closed the door, and slid down it to sit on the floor. Her hand still tingled where he'd kissed it. Her heart beat thunder in her chest. She was a widow in mourning. He was forbidden in every way that mattered to the world she'd left behind. This could only end in disaster. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara Whitmore smiled. Christmas came to the mountains with bitter cold and pristine beauty. Clara marked the day alone, reading from her Bible by candlelight, trying to summon the faith that had once come so easily. The words felt hollow now, echoes of a life that belonged to someone else. She hadn't seen Elias in 3 days, not since that morning in the clearing when he'd held her hand and she'd felt something crack open inside her chest. 3 days of jumping at every sound, of checking the tree line, of telling herself she was relieved by his absence. All lies, of course. She missed him with an ache that frightened her. On Christmas night, she found a gift by her door, a pair of rabbit fur mittens, soft as clouds and lined with red flannel. No note, but she knew those careful stitches. She pressed the mittens to her face, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and pine, and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Kansas. The next morning brought resolve sharp as winter air. She dressed in her warmest clothes, not the widow's weeds, but a practical brown wool dress she'd packed almost as an afterthought. Her mourning veil she left on its peg. Let the town talk. She had business there. The journey to Pine Ridge tested her newfound determination. Snow had fallen heavy, and without her horse, still healing at Elias's stable, she had to walk. By the time she reached the settlement, her feet were numb despite her sturdy boots. The church stood at the town's heart, modest but well kept. Clara paused at its door, gathering courage. Inside, she could hear the organist practicing. Mrs. Elmwood, ancient and half-deaf but devoted. The familiar sounds of hymns made her stomach turn. "May I help you?" Reverend Marcus Blackwood stood behind her, having emerged from the parsonage. Young, earnest, with the soft look of a man who'd never known real hardship. Nothing like Thomas. Yet the collar around his neck made her pulse race with remembered fear. "I need to speak with you," Clara managed. About my soul." His face lit with professional concern. "Of course. Mrs. Whitmore, please, come to my study." The parsonage smelled of beeswax and righteousness. Clara sat rigid in the offered chair, while Reverend Blackwood poured tea she didn't want. "I'm glad you've come," he said, settling behind his desk. "The congregation has been concerned. A woman alone, so far from town, especially in winter. I'm managing well enough. Still, it's not proper, not safe." He leaned forward. "I know grief drives us to extremes, but surely your late husband wouldn't want—" "My husband is dead." The words came out harder than intended. What he would or wouldn't want no longer signifies. Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "My dear woman, such bitterness. I need to make confession." Clara gripped her teacup to still her shaking hands. "Will you hear it?" Of course, though we're not Catholic here. Will you hear it or not?" He nodded, clearly unsettled. Clara set down her cup and folded her hands. "I've been unfaithful to my husband's memory, in my thoughts, in my heart." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "There's a man. I've allowed myself to have feelings, improper feelings." "Ah." Blackwood relaxed slightly. on familiar ground now. My dear Mrs. Whitmore, such temptations are natural. The flesh is weak, especially in grief. But you must resist. Your husband beat me. The words fell into silence like stones into deep water. Blackwood's mouth opened, closed, opened again. What? My husband, your predecessor in faith, beat me regularly, carefully, where it wouldn't show. Clara's voice was steady now, empty of emotion. Called it correction, said I was willful, needed guidance. The last time, I fought back. He fell down the stairs. Mrs. Whitmore. He died. I let people think it was an accident. I wore mourning and wept at his grave and swore to remain faithful. A bitter laugh escaped. Faithful to a monster. And now there's a man who treats me with kindness. And I'm supposed to feel guilt? Tell me, Reverend, where's God's justice in that? Blackwood had gone pale. These are serious accusations. I'm not accusing, just confessing. Isn't that what you wanted? If what you say is true. If? Clara stood. Look at me. Really look. Ask yourself why a woman flees civilization for a mountain winter. Ask why I wear veils and speak to no one. Ask why the mere sight of your collar makes me want to run. Please, sit down. We should pray. I'm done praying. She moved to the door, then paused. That man I mentioned? The one I have feelings for? He's never raised a hand to me, never raised his voice. He brings me firewood and teaches me to survive and looks at me like I'm worth saving. She turned back. Some would call him savage, say his blood is tainted, his soul beyond redemption, but between him and my late husband, tell me, which one deserves to be called godly? She left Blackwood stammering and walked out into the cold. Her business in town wasn't finished. At the general store, she made her purchases, flour, salt, coffee, and then, heart-hammering, she added, I need cartridges. For a Winchester rifle. Mr. Henley, the shopkeeper, frowned. That's a man's weapon, Mrs. Whitmore. It was my husband's. I keep it for protection. Still, would you prefer I starve when game is plenty, or freeze for want of defending my woodpile from thieves? She met his eyes steadily. I'm a woman alone. Mr. Henley. Surely even a widow has the right to survive. He sold her the cartridges, but she felt his disapproval like weight on her shoulders. As she left, she heard his wife whisper, always was something off about her, and now, buying ammunition like some frontier woman. Yes, Clara thought, some frontier woman. The description fit better than widow ever had. The walk home was harder, burdened with supplies and the emotional toll of confrontation. Halfway there, as shadows grew long and cold, bit deeper, she heard wolves. Not close, but not far enough. She quickened her pace, one hand on the knife at her belt. Then he was there. Elias, materializing from the forest like he'd been born from it. He took her heavy pack without a word, and they walked in companionable silence until the wolf calls faded. Heard you went to church, he said finally. How? Never mind. Of course he knew. He knew everything that happened in these mountains. I had business there. Did you now? I told him the truth. About Thomas. About you. Elias stopped walking. Why? Because I'm tired of lies, tired of pretending grief I don't feel, tired of... Her voice broke. Tired. He studied her in the failing light. Then, deliberately, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Such a simple gesture. Innocent, even. But his fingers lingered against her cheek, and Clara felt that touch everywhere. Come on, he said quietly. It's getting dark. At her cabin. He built up the fire while she unpacked her supplies. Domestic, almost. As if they'd done this 100 times before. Would do it 100 times again. Stay for supper, she said. Not asking, stating. He nodded. She made simple fare, beans and cornbread. The last of the preserved vegetables. They ate by firelight, and Clara found herself talking. About Kansas, about her childhood, about her sister who wrote weekly. begging her to come home. She says I'm wasting my life here, that I should marry again, have children, be respectable. Is that what you want? Clara considered. I used to think so. Now, I don't know what I want, only what I don't want. Does that make sense? More than you know. Tell me, she said suddenly. About you. About how you came to be here. Elias set down his plate. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my mother was Arapaho, taken in a raid when she was 15. My father, he shrugged, white trapper, kept her 2 winters, then sold her to missionaries when she got pregnant. They raised me. Tried to. Anyway. What happened? What always happens. 2 white for the tribes, 2 Indian for the towns. When I was 16, I made the mistake of falling for the minister's daughter. His smile was sharp as winter. Sarah Hawthorne, sweet as honey until her father found us in the barn. Then she screamed I was forcing her. Clara's hand flew to her throat. Oh, Elias. They beat me near to death. Would have hanged me, but the sheriff's wife spoke up. Said she'd seen Sarah chasing after me for weeks, so they just drove me out. Told me if I ever showed my face again. He shrugged again. Been in these mountains ever since. How long? 15 years, give or take. 15 years of solitude. Clara couldn't imagine it. Don't you get lonely? Every day. He looked at her. Until recently. The fire crackled between them. Clara felt pulled by invisible threads, drawn to this man who'd known rejection as deep as her own, who'd built a life from nothing but will and wilderness. I should go, he said, not moving. Yes, she agreed, not wanting him to. They sat frozen in that moment, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Then Clara did what she'd wanted to do for weeks. She reached across the small space and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused and perfect. This is dangerous, he said. I know. They already whisper about you. If they knew, let them know. The words surprised her with their fierceness. I've lived my whole life by their rules. Been the perfect daughter, the obedient wife. And what did it get me? Bruises and lies and a grave I had to pretend to mourn. She tightened her grip. I'm done being what they expect. Clara, kiss me. The words hung in the air like suspended snowflakes. Elias's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he was moving, pulling her toward him, and his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like Thomas's possessive claims. This was question and answer, give and take, gentle despite the hunger she could feel coiled in his muscles. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt remade. I should go, he said again, voice rough. Yes, she whispered, not releasing his hand. He stood, drawing her up with him. For a moment they swayed together, caught between propriety and desire. Then Elias stepped back, though his hand lingered in hers. I'll stay away if you want, give you time to think. No, the word came swift and sure. No more staying away, no more pretending. I've spent months in this cabin trying to be dead with him. She swallowed. I want to be alive. With you. Something broke in his expression then. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair. She felt him tremble and realized this strong, self-sufficient man was as starved for connection as she was. You don't know what you're asking, he said against her neck. Then teach me. He pulled back to look at her. Teach you? To shoot, to hunt, to survive without needing supplies from town. She touched his face, marveling at the freedom to do so. Teach me to live like you do, free. It's not freedom, it's exile. Then we'll be exiled together. He caught her hand, pressed it flat against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, rapid as her own. You sure? Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him again. This time he didn't hold back, arms coming around her, lifting her against him. Clara felt wild, reckless, more herself than she'd ever been. When they finally parted, both shaking, Elias rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said. I'll come tomorrow. Bring the rifle. Just the rifle? That earned her a smile. Rare and precious. Wicked woman. Learning to be. He kissed her once more, quick and hard, then was gone. Clara stood in her doorway, watching him disappear into darkness, and felt no fear, no shame, no guilt, just alive. Blessedly, finally alive. She closed the door and began preparing for bed, humming under her breath. Tomorrow he would teach her to shoot. She would learn to bring down game, to move through the forest, to need nothing from the town that had judged her and found her wanting. And perhaps, in the quiet spaces between lessons, they would explore this new territory opening between them, this wilderness of the heart, more treacherous and beautiful than any mountain pass. Clara blew out her candle and lay down, still wearing the ghost of his kisses. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in clean white silence. A fresh start, a blank page. Tomorrow, she thought, and smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow. The Winchester felt heavier than Clara remembered. She'd cleaned it dutifully these past months, the way Thomas had shown her, but she'd never fired it, never wanted to touch something that had been his. Now, with Elias's steady presence beside her, the rifle became just a tool. Nothing more. Here. He adjusted her stance, his hands warm through her coat. Feet wider. You need a stable base. They stood in a clearing a quarter-mile from her cabin, fresh snow crunching beneath their boots. Elias had set up targets, pieces of bark propped against fallen logs at varying distances. Professional. Proper. As if the memory of last night's kisses didn't hang between them like morning mist. Breathe in, he instructed, his voice calm. Hold. Squeeze the trigger as you exhale. Don't pull. Squeeze. The rifle cracked. Her shot went wide. Bark untouched. The recoil knocked her back a step, and Elias steadied her. Again. For an hour they worked, until her shoulder ached and her ears rang despite the cotton wadding he'd given her. But by the end, she could hit the nearest target more often than not. Good, Elias said, taking the rifle to clean it. You learn quick. I have a good teacher. He glanced at her, something flickering in his eyes, but he only nodded and continued his careful maintenance of the weapon. This new dance between them was delicate. By day, he was all business, teaching her to read animal tracks, to set snares, to find her way by stars and moss and the flow of water. He kept careful distance, rarely touching her except to correct her form or guide her through some task. But his eyes told different stories. She'd catch him watching her with such intensity it stole her breath. Once, demonstrating how to skin a rabbit, his fingers had brushed hers, and they'd both frozen, caught in that accidental touch like flies in amber. Why do you hold back? She asked one afternoon, bold in her frustration. They'd spent the morning checking trap lines, successful enough to have 3 rabbits and a grouse for their efforts. Now they sat by her fire, cleaning their catch. Elias didn't pretend to misunderstand, because once I stop holding back, there's no going back. Maybe I don't want to go back. You say that now. Don't. Clara set down her knife, anger sparking. Don't tell me what I feel, what I know. I've had enough of men deciding things for me. He went still. Then, carefully, he put aside his own work and faced her fully. You're right. I apologize. The simple words deflated her anger. Thomas had never apologized. Not once in 7 years of marriage. Tell me, Elias said quietly. Tell me what happened. The truth of it. Clara had thought she was ready, had practiced the words in her mind, but sitting here with his patient eyes on her, she found her throat closing. I can't. Then don't. Not with words. He held out his hand. Show me. She didn't understand until he guided her to stand, then carefully, so carefully, placed his hands on her shoulders. He grabbed you here? Clara nodded, unable to speak. Elias's hands were gentle, nothing like Thomas's had been, but muscle memory made her tense. Where else? Slowly, Clara guided his hands to all the places Thomas had claimed in anger. Her arms, where bruises had bloomed like dark flowers. Her throat, where his fingers had pressed when she'd spoken out of turn. Her back, where he'd pushed her into walls, into furniture, into compliance. Elias followed her lead, his touch whisper-light, and somehow that made it bearable, made it less about Thomas and more about reclaiming her own body. When they finished, tears ran down her face, but she felt lighter, cleaner. "The stairs?" Elias asked. "I found him," Clara whispered, "with the Hensley girl, Mary, in the vestry after evening service. She was crying, her dress torn, and he was—" She swallowed. "I shouted, pulled him away. He came after me, furious that I'd interrupted, said it was his right, his calling, to guide lost sheep however he saw fit." Elias's hands tightened on her shoulders, then deliberately relaxed. "We fought in the parsonage, really fought, for the first time. I told him I would go to the sheriff, to the church elders." He laughed, said no one would believe me over him, and he was right. Her voice broke. "He was always right about that, but I wouldn't back down. So he grabbed me, started dragging me to our room. To teach me proper submission, he said, but at the top of the stairs, I twisted, pushed. He wasn't expecting resistance. He fell. Yes, broke his neck. I sat there beside him for an hour, waiting to feel something. Grief, guilt, relief, anything. But there was just nothing." She looked up at Elias. "What kind of woman feels nothing when her husband dies?" "The kind who survived," he said simply. "The kind who did what was necessary. The sheriff barely investigated. Everyone knew Thomas was righteous. I was the grieving widow. Mary Hensley's family left town the next week, said they were moving west for opportunities. No one questioned it. And you ran here. I couldn't stay. Couldn't sit in his church, in his house, pretending grief I didn't feel. So yes, I ran, like a coward, not coward." Elias cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears. "Survivor?" She leaned into his touch, starved for this gentleness. "Some days I think I died with him, that I'm just a ghost pretending to be alive." "You're no ghost," his voice roughened. "Ghosts don't learn to shoot, don't laugh when they miss their target, don't blush when a man watches them too long. You've been watching? Every moment I can steal." The confession hung between them. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Elias, I dream about you." The words seemed pulled from him. "Wake up reaching for you, have to remind myself you're not mine to reach for. What if I want to be?" He closed his eyes. "You don't know. Then tell me. No more dancing around it. Tell me what holds you back." When he opened his eyes, she saw pain there, old and deep. "Pine Ridge isn't the first town I've lived near. Wasn't the first place I tried to build something like a life. 3 years ago, I was trading regular with a settlement 2 valleys over. Even had friends, or close enough. Then a white woman went missing. Husband said she'd run off with a traveling merchant. But folks started whispering about the half-breed who lived in the woods, who came and went like smoke." Clara's stomach clenched. "What happened? They found her body spring thaw, been dead since winter, throat cut, wedding ring missing. Clear signs her husband did it, found the ring hidden in his workshop, blood still on it. But by then, the whispers had become shouts. A mob came for me, would have strung me up, but I knew the woods better. Disappeared, started over here. That's monstrous. That's the world." He stepped back, releasing her. "You take up with me, really take up with me, and every bad thing that happens will be laid at our feet. Every missing chicken, every failed crop, every unexplained death. They'll drive you out too, or worse. So we're supposed to just... what? Deny this? Pretend we feel nothing? I'm supposed to protect you, even from myself. I don't need protection. I need..." Clara stopped, frustrated beyond words. "I need to not be alone anymore. I need to wake up and not dread the day ahead. I need you." The last words came out barely above a whisper. Elias looked like she'd shot him. "Clara." No more talking. No more explaining why we can't." She moved closer, saw him tense. Unless you don't want..." He kissed her, hard, desperate, like a dam bursting. His hands tangled in her hair, and Clara made a sound she'd never made before. Pure need and relief combined. When they broke apart, both gasping, she saw her own hunger reflected in his eyes. "This changes everything," he warned. "Good." That startled a laugh from him. Wicked woman. Getting wickeder by the day. This time when he kissed her, it was slower, exploratory. She learned the texture of his mouth, the way he tasted of pine and snow, and something essentially him. His hands mapped her face, her throat, careful and reverent. When a distant gunshot echoed through the forest, they sprang apart like guilty children. Elias immediately alert, hand going to the knife at his belt. "Hunters," he said after a moment. "Mile off, maybe more." But the spell was broken. They finished cleaning the game in charged silence. Then Elias helped her carry the meat to her cabin for smoking. At the door, he paused. "I should check my trap lines. Will you come back, tonight?" He studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "If you're certain." "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." After he left, Clara threw herself into activity. She prepared the rabbits for smoking, made cornbread, tidied her already neat cabin. Anything to keep her hands busy while her mind raced. She was really doing this. Taking up with a man who wasn't her husband, who wasn't even fully white, who lived outside society's bounds by choice and necessity. Both. Her mother would be horrified. Her sister. Clara found herself laughing, wild and free. Let them be horrified. She'd lived by their rules, done everything right. And where had it gotten her? Married to a monster, forced to live a lie, driven to kill to save herself and an innocent girl. No more. When Elias returned as shadows grew long, he carried a haunch of venison and something wrapped in oilcloth. "What's this?" He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a book. Poetry, she saw with surprise. Well worn, margins filled with notes in a careful hand. "Thought you might, you mentioned missing books." Clara traced the spine gently. "You're giving me your book?" "Lending." His ears reddened slightly. "So I have reason to come back." "You need a reason?" "Always good to have more than one." She made dinner while he read to her, his deep voice bringing the words alive. It was domestic in a way that made her chest ache. This was what she'd imagined marriage would be, back when she was young and foolish. Partnership, companionship, two people choosing to share space and time. As full dark fell, nervousness replaced contentment. They cleaned dishes in silence thick with anticipation. When there was nothing left to tidy, they stood awkward as strangers. "I don't," Clara began, then stopped. "That is, with Thomas, it was never, I don't know how to—" Understanding softened Elias's features. "We don't have to do anything. Being here is enough. Is it? For you? You think I'm some kind of saint?" His laugh was rueful. "Clara, I want you so bad it's eating me alive. But wanting isn't having, not if it costs you peace. What if peace isn't what I need?" She stepped closer. "What if what I need is to feel, really feel? To remember I'm more than just a widow, more than a ghost." "You're sure?" Instead of answering, she began unpinning her hair. It fell around her shoulders in waves, and Elias made a low sound that sent heat through her belly. "Sure enough," she whispered. He came to her then, and there was no more hesitation. His hands in her hair, his mouth on hers. The solid warmth of him against her. It was nothing like her marriage bed. This was choice, desire. Two people reaching for each other from their own free will. When he lifted her, carried her to the narrow bed, Clara felt no fear. When he paused, searching her face for permission, she drew him down to her. "Yes," she said against his mouth. "Yes." What followed was revelation. Thomas had taken, Elias gave. Where there had been pain, now pleasure. Where there had been duty, now joy. Clara discovered her body was capable of feelings she hadn't known existed. That desire could be mutual, that wanting and being wanted were different sides of the same glorious coin. After, they lay entwined. Clara's head on Elias's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. His fingers combed through her hair, gentle and soothing. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured. "Just wondering if I should feel guilty." "Do you?" Clara considered. "No, and that probably makes me wicked. Makes you honest." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Rest. Dawn comes early." But she couldn't rest, couldn't stop touching him, assuring herself he was real. The scars on his chest and arms each told stories of survival. She traced them like reading Braille, learning this new language of skin and trust. "Will you stay? Try to make me leave." Clara smiled against his chest. Outside, wind howled around the cabin walls, but inside was warmth and safety and something that might, if she was very careful, grow into love. No, she realized, not grow into. It was already there, had been growing since that first night when he'd sheltered her from the storm. Love like a green shoot beneath snow, waiting for the right moment to bloom. "Sleep," Elias said again, and this time she obeyed, drifting off to the rhythm of his breathing. When she woke, dawn was painting the windows gray, and he was gone. But on the pillow beside her lay a single red feather, fox bright against the white linen. A promise, a claim, a declaration that needed no words. Clara held the feather to her lips and smiled. The morning after brought no regret, only a strange lightness Clara hadn't felt in years. She moved through her chores, water from the stream, wood for the fire, checking the smokehouse with new awareness of her body. Every muscle held memory of Elias's touch. Every breath seemed deeper, cleaner. But as the day wore on, old habits crept back. The voice in her head that sounded like her mother, like Thomas, like every sermon she'd ever heard about fallen women. By afternoon, she stood before her small mirror, searching her face for signs of sin. "You look the same," she told her reflection. Shouldn't wickedness show? When Elias appeared at dusk, she was sitting rigid at her table, Bible open before her, though she hadn't read a word in an hour. He took in the scene with one glance, having second thoughts, third and fourth thoughts. She managed a weak smile. I don't know how to be this person, this woman who takes a lover, who breaks her vows." "What vows?" His voice was gentle but firm. "To a dead man who hurt you? To a God who let it happen? To a town that would see you waste away rather than live? You make it sound simple. It is simple, just not easy." He moved closer but didn't touch her, waiting. "Tell me what you need." "Time," Clara said after a moment. "To reconcile who I was with who I'm becoming. Then take time." He turned to go, and panic flared in her chest. "Wait," he paused. "Stay for supper, just supper. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts tonight." The relief on his face matched her own. Just supper. They fell into a pattern over the following days. Elias would come by morning or evening, never assuming welcome, always waiting to be invited. They worked together, hunting, preparing for deeper winter, reinforcing her cabin against the brutal cold to come. Slowly, Clara's rigid control eased. She found herself laughing at his dry observations, touching his arm without thinking, stealing kisses when the mood struck. But always, as darkness fell, one of them would pull back. Clara needed time. Elias gave it without complaint. It was the peace before the storm. The first sign of trouble came 2 weeks later. Clara had ventured to Pine Ridge for supplies, wearing her customary widow's attire. The townspeople's usual cold politeness had sharpened into something else. Conversations died when she entered the general store. Women pulled their children closer. Men watched her with expressions that made her skin crawl. "Heard you had quite the conversation with Reverend Blackwood." "Mrs." Henley said as she measured out flour. Her tone could have frozen hell itself. "I spoke with him. Yes. Scandalous accusations. About your dear departed husband. About other things." Clara kept her expression neutral. "I made confession. I thought such things were private. Nothing's private in a town this small." The woman's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction, especially when it concerns the spiritual welfare of the community. Clara took her purchases and left, but she felt eyes on her all the way out of town. That night, she told Elias about the encounter. It's starting, he said quietly. The whispers. The watching. Sure you want to continue down this path? Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to protect you. I told you, I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection sometimes. He touched the scar on his cheek, remnant of the beating that had driven him to the mountains. Pride makes poor armor against a mob. Clara wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. This wasn't pessimism. It was experience. A week later, she found her answer. Returning from the stream with water, she discovered her door standing open. Inside, destruction. Her mother's rocking chair lay in pieces, flour and cornmeal scattered across the floor, mixed with dirt and worse. Her clothes pulled from their chest, torn and trampled. But it was the Bible that made her knees buckle. It lay open on her table, a knife driven through its pages. A single word was carved deep into the wood beside it. Jezebel. Clara sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Not by fear, by fury. How dare they? How dare they invade her home, destroy her things, judge her life? She'd done nothing but try to survive, to find a moment's happiness in a world that had shown her precious little. That's how Elias found her, kneeling in the wreckage, shaking with rage. Clara! He stopped, taking in the scene. His expression went carefully blank, but she saw the muscle jump in his jaw. Pack what you can carry. What? This is a warning. Next time will be worse. Pack what you need. I'm not running. She stood, fists clenched. This is my home. I paid for it. I've survived everything else. I'll survive this too. Not if they burn you out. Not if they come in numbers. He gripped her shoulders. I've seen this before. It only gets worse. Then we fight back. We. His laugh was bitter. There is no we in their eyes. Just a widow turned whore and the savage who corrupted her. The ugly words hit like slaps. Clara jerked free of his hold. Is that what you think? That you corrupted me? It's what they think. What they'll always think. Pain flickered across his features. Maybe it's better if I... Don't you dare! Now she gripped him, fingers digging into his arms. Don't you dare leave me now. Not when... She swallowed hard. Not when I love you. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. Elias went absolutely still. You don't mean that. I do. God help me. I do. Tears came then, hot and fierce. I love you, and I won't let them drive you away. I won't let them win. He pulled her against him, held her while she cried out her fury and fear. When the storm passed, he helped her clean up the worst of the mess. The chair was beyond saving, but most everything else could be salvaged or replaced. Except her sense of safety. That was gone forever. Stay tonight, she said as darkness fell. Not a question, a statement of need. Clara, I need you, not just for protection. I need to remember why I'm fighting, what I'm fighting for. She touched his face. Please. He stayed. That night was different from their first. Less discovery, more desperate claiming. Clara needed the solid reality of him, needed to drive out the violation of her space with something better, stronger. When morning came, she woke to find him dressed and armed, checking his rifle with grim efficiency. Where are you going? Town, to make some things clear. Fear spiked through her. Elias, no, that's what they want, an excuse to... I'm not going to fight, just to be seen, to let them know you're not alone. He leaned down, kissed her hard. Bar the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. The hours he was gone stretched like years. Clara tried to work, sewing torn clothes, salvaging what food she could, but her hands shook too badly. Every sound made her heart race. When she finally heard his distinctive knock, she nearly sobbed with relief. He was unbloodied but tense, movements sharp with contained violence. What happened? Had a talk with some folks, made sure they understood the situation. He set down his rifle, pulled her close. Also stopped by Reverend Blackwood. You didn't lay a hand on him, just suggested he might want to remind his flock about Christian charity. and mentioned I'd be very disappointed if anything else happened to you or your property. His smile was all teeth. Think he got the message. But Clara knew it wouldn't be enough. Men like those who destroyed her home didn't fear words, only force. And Elias, for all his strength, was one man against many. We could leave, she said quietly. Go somewhere else. Start fresh. That what you want? To run? Clara considered. Part of her, the part that just wanted peace, wanted to be left alone with this man she'd chosen, said yes, but the larger part, the part that had survived Thomas and his cruelties, refused to bow. No, this is my home now. Our home. I won't let them drive me out. Then we prepare for war. The words should have frightened her. Instead, Clara felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Let them come. She'd learned to shoot, to survive, to fight for what she needed. And what she needed was this life she'd built, this love she'd found against all odds. Teach me more, she said. Not just hunting, defense, fighting, everything you know. You sure? I've never been sure. So began a different kind of education. Elias taught her to move quietly through the forest, to read sign not just of animals, but of men, where to strike to disable, how to use her smaller size as advantage, not weakness. Clara absorbed it all with grim determination. But there were moments of light too, stolen afternoons when they'd forget to be vigilant, losing themselves in each other. Evenings by the fire when Elias would read poetry in his rumbling voice. Mornings when she'd wake to find him watching her with such tenderness it made her throat tight. I never expected this, she told him one night as they lay entwined. Never thought I could feel whole again. You were always whole, he murmured against her hair. Just needed to remember it. 2 weeks passed without incident. Clara began to hope the threat had passed, that Elias's warning had been enough. Then came the night when everything changed. She woke to Elias's hand over her mouth, his body tense beside her. Someone's coming, he breathed in her ear. Several someones. Through the window, she saw lights, torches, moving through the trees. Her blood turned to ice. Get dressed, Elias ordered, already pulling on his clothes. Take the rifle. Clara obeyed with hands that barely trembled. This was what they'd prepared for. She wouldn't panic now. The light stopped just outside effective rifle range. A voice called out. She recognized Jake Morrison, the blacksmith's son. Always been a bully, even before he'd grown into his father's muscles. Widow Whitmore, we know he's in there. Send him out, and we'll leave peaceable. Elias checked his weapons with deadly calm. How many you count? 6, maybe 7. Clara peered through a gap in the shutters. Armed. When I give the word, you fire over their heads, then reload fast as you can. Elias, trust me. Clara positioned herself at the window, rifle ready. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. All those hours of practice had prepared her for this moment. Last warning, widow! Morrison's voice held ugly anticipation. Send out the savage, or we'll burn you both. Now, Elias said. Clara fired. The crack of the rifle split the night. She heard shouts, saw torches scatter. Her fingers flew through the reload. Thomas's teachings finally useful for something. I'll go, Elias said. Draw them off. No. The word came out sharp as the rifle's report. We stand together or not at all. He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he smiled, fierce and proud. Together then. What followed was the longest night of Clara's life. The men outside shouted threats, occasionally firing at the cabin. Clara and Elias took turns at the windows, returning fire only when someone got too close. She learned that night that she could shoot to wound if not to kill, that she could face violence without flinching, that love was worth fighting for. As dawn approached, the attackers grew bolder. Clara saw them gathering combustibles. They meant to make good on their threat to burn them out. Her ammunition was running low. Elias had that look that meant he was about to do something stupidly noble, like surrender himself. That's when she heard it. Horses, many horses, riding hard. Sheriff Coleman's voice boomed across the clearing. That's enough. Everyone stand down, or I'll arrest the lot of you. Clara sagged with relief. Beside her, Elias remained tense, watching. Since when do you care about justice? He muttered. But the sheriff was true to his word. Within minutes, the mob had dispersed, though not without ugly looks and uglier words. Coleman himself approached the cabin. You folks all right in there? Clara opened the door, rifle still in hand. We're alive. The sheriff took in the bullet holes, the scattered torches, her and Elias's armed stance. His expression was unreadable. Reverend Blackwood rode to the county seat, he said finally. Told me there might be trouble. Said he couldn't stand by while violence was done in his community. Clara blinked in surprise. The Reverend had actually listened. This won't be the end of it. Coleman continued. Folks got strong feelings about certain things. Might be safer if we're not leaving. Clara said firmly, This is our home. The sheriff sighed. Figured you'd say that. Can't promise I can stop every fool thing people might do, but I'll keep the peace best I can. You have my word on that. After he left, Clara and Elias stood in their bullet-scarred cabin, processing what had happened. We survived, Clara said, somewhat amazed. This time, Elias pulled her close. They'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow or next week, but eventually. Then we'll be ready. She looked up at him, fierce with love and determination. We'll always be ready. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Clara knew that whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd faced this night, together, two outcasts who'd found in each other a home worth defending, a love worth any price. Outside, the sun rose over the mountains, painting the snow gold and rose. A new day, a new chance. And despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Clara Whitmore smiled. Spring came late to the mountains that year, but when it arrived, it brought more than melting snow. Clara was drawing water from the stream when she saw him, a stranger on the road, dressed in black broadcloth despite the warming weather. Something about his rigid posture, his careful gait, sent warning through her bones. She abandoned the water bucket and ran. Elias was skinning a deer behind the cabin. He looked up at her approach, instantly alert. Someone's coming, on the road. He looks... She struggled for words. Official? They'd grown complacent in the months since the mob. Sheriff Coleman had kept his word, maintaining peace, if not friendliness. The townspeople still shunned Clara, but the violence had stopped. She and Elias had settled into a life together. Not easy, but theirs, now, watching the stranger approach. That hard-won peace felt fragile as spring ice. The man was younger than Clara had first thought, perhaps 30, with the soft look of someone who'd never worked with his hands. When he removed his hat, she saw sandy hair carefully pomaded, pale eyes that missed nothing. Mrs. Whitmore? His voice carried the clipped tones of education. Mrs. Clara Whitmore. Yes. My name is Josiah Hartley. I'm a lawyer from Kansas City. He produced a leather folder from his coat. I'm here regarding your late husband's estate. The words hit Clara like cold water. My husband's estate was settled. There was little enough. The church took the house, his books. I'm not speaking of property. Madam? Hartley's eyes flicked to Elias, who stood silent and watchful beside her. Perhaps we could speak privately? Whatever you have to say, you can say here. The lawyer's mouth pinched with disapproval, but he continued. Very well. I represent the interests of Reverend Thomas Whitmore, your husband's brother. He has recently returned from missionary work in the Orient and was disturbed to learn of his brother's death and your subsequent circumstances. Clara's stomach turned to stone. Thomas had spoken of his brother perhaps twice in their marriage. Matthew, older by 10 years, who'd left for China before Thomas entered seminary. She'd thought him half a world away. No threat to her new life. What does Matthew want? Justice, Mrs. Whitmore. He's received concerning reports about his brother's death, the hasty burial, your rapid departure, your current... Another glance at Elias. Living situation. He believes a proper investigation is warranted. My husband fell down the stairs. Clara said steadily. The sheriff investigated. The matter is closed. Is it? Hartley opened his folder, producing several sheets. I have here sworn statements from members of your former congregation. Martha Hensley states that you made wild accusations against your husband regarding her daughter. Samuel Morrison claims you were seen in the company of a certain individual. He gestured at Elias without looking at him. Mere weeks after your husband's death, Reverend Blackwood himself testifies that you confessed to harboring improper feelings while still in mourning. Each word was a nail in her coffin. Clara felt Elias tense beside her but didn't dare look at him. Furthermore, Hartley continued with obvious satisfaction, there are questions about your husband's will, or rather, the lack thereof. As his widow, you inherited what little he had, but if you were complicit in his death, you're saying I murdered him. Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, calm. I'm saying there are questions that deserve answers. Matthew Whitmore has petitioned for your late husband's body to be exhumed and examined. He's also filed papers challenging your inheritance and, should wrongdoing be discovered, requesting your arrest for murder. The world tilted. Clara gripped the porch rail to stay upright. Get off her land. Elias's voice was quiet, but Hartley stepped back as if he'd shouted, I'm here on legal business. You're here to threaten a woman who's done nothing but try to survive. Leave. Now! I'll be staying at Pine Ridge, Hartley said, gathering his dignity. Mrs. Whitmore, you'll be expected to provide testimony within the week. I suggest you find legal representation. His smile was thin as a blade. Though I doubt any lawyer in 3 counties will take your case, given the circumstances. After he left, Clara sank onto the porch steps. Her hands shook so badly she had to clasp them together. They're going to dig him up, she whispered. They're going to? Will they find anything? Elias knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Think, is there any way to prove he didn't just fall? Clara forced herself to remember that night. The fight, the push. Thomas falling backward, the terrible sound when he hit the bottom. She'd checked for a pulse. Found none. Had closed his staring eyes and sat beside him for an hour before raising the alarm. I don't know, maybe there was bruising on his arms where I grabbed him, trying to pull him away from Mary. If they look closely enough, then we leave. Tonight. Pack what we can carry. No. The word surprised them both. No, I won't run. Not again. Clara, be sensible. If they arrest you, then they arrest me. She met his eyes. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of letting fear dictate my life. Fear or wisdom? Is there a difference anymore? She stood, pacing the small porch. If I run now, I'll never stop. There'll always be another town, another accusation, another reason to pack up and disappear. She turned to face him. Is that the life you want? Always looking over our shoulders? The life I want is you alive and free. But not happy? Not at peace? Clara shook her head. I killed him. Elias, not murder, not in cold blood, but I killed him just the same. Maybe it's time I faced that. You defended yourself. A court won't see it that way. A widow's word against a dead minister's reputation? She laughed bitterly. We both know how that ends. They argued through the night, but Clara remained firm. When morning came, she put on her best dress, not black but deep blue, the color of mountain twilight, and prepared to face whatever came next. Elias insisted on accompanying her to town. They found Pine Ridge buzzing with gossip. Matthew Whitmore had arrived the previous evening, and his resemblance to Thomas was striking enough to set tongues wagging. Clara glimpsed him outside the church, tall and severe in minister's black, and for a moment her courage faltered. I'm here, Elias murmured beside her. Always. The meeting was held in the church, a calculated insult. Clara knew. Make her face her accusers in God's house, where Thomas had preached his poison. Hartley was there, of course, along with Sheriff Coleman, Reverend Blackwood, and several town elders, and Matthew Whitmore, who studied her with eyes so like his brother's that Clara's skin crawled. You're younger than I expected, Matthew said without preamble. Thomas wrote that he'd married a woman of mature years and steady temperament. Your brother wrote many things that weren't true. Matthew's expression hardened. My brother was a man of God. Your brother was a man. Clara countered. No more, no less, with a man's failings. Failings you claim justify murder? I've justified nothing. I've confessed to nothing. Your brother fell down the stairs. That's all I know. Liar! The word cracked like a whip. Matthew's composure shattered, revealing fury beneath. Thomas wrote to me, told me about your willfulness, your rebellious nature. How he strove to correct you with Christian patience. With his fists. Clara stood, unable to remain seated. Did he write that? Did he tell you how patient his corrections were, how Christian his bruises? Gasps from the assembled witnesses. Sheriff Coleman shifted uncomfortably, but Matthew's face only grew stonier. The desperate lies of a guilty woman, and even if there were truth to such claims, it would only prove Thomas right. You needed correction, guidance. Instead, you killed him and took up with— His gaze swept over Elias with disgust. With this creature. Careful, Elias said softly. Or what? You'll kill me too, like you killed James Fletcher? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Clara saw the trap now, saw how carefully this had been orchestrated. They weren't just after her, they wanted Elias too. That's enough. Sheriff Coleman stood. Matthew, I understand you're grieving, but I'm seeking justice. Matthew pulled out a telegram. I've been in contact with the authorities in Millbrook, 2 valleys over. They're very interested to know that their suspected murderer has been hiding here, living openly with another killer. It seems. Clara looked at Elias, saw the resignation in his eyes. They'd both known this day would come. The past always collected its debts. I'll make you a deal, Clara said suddenly. Me for him. I'll confess to killing Thomas. Write it out. Sign it. Whatever you want. In exchange, all charges against Elias are dropped. Here and in Millbrook, no. Elias gripped her arm. Clara, no. It's my choice. She kept her eyes on Matthew. That's what you really want, isn't it? To see me punished? To clear your brother's name? Fine. You can have that. But Elias walks free. Matthew considered. And in his calculating look, Clara saw he was more lawyer than minister. Confession to murder, in writing, including details of how and why. Agreed. Clara, Elias's voice broke. Don't do this. She turned to him, memorizing his face. You gave me a winter of happiness, of real love. That's more than I ever expected to have. She touched his cheek. Let me give you freedom in return. I don't want freedom without you. Then live for both of us. She kissed him, there in front of everyone, not caring who saw or what they thought. Live and remember and know that you were loved. Hartley produced paper and pen with unseemly eagerness. Clara sat at the communion table, another calculated insult, and began to write. She told the truth, mostly. The abuse, the final fight, the push that sent Thomas tumbling. She left out Mary Hensley, protecting the girl even now. When she signed her name, her hand was steady. There! She stood, chin high. You have what you wanted. But Matthew wasn't finished. There's the matter of my brother's property. Money you stole. What money? Clara laughed. Actually laughed. Your brother left nothing but debts and sermons. I've been living on the charity of others and what I could earn with my own hands. Lies. Enough. Sheriff Coleman took the confession, read it with obvious reluctance. This settles the matter of Thomas Whitmore's death. As for the rest, Matthew, your brother left no estate to speak of. I handled that investigation myself. But I said enough. The sheriff's voice carried final authority. Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of your husband, Elias Crow. You're free to go, and I'll make sure Millbrook knows there's no cause to pursue their old complaints. As the sheriff moved to arrest her, chaos erupted. Elias lunged forward, only to be restrained by several townsmen. Matthew smiled with vicious satisfaction. And in the back of the church, a small voice said, Stop. Everyone turned. Mary Hensley stood in the doorway. No longer the frightened 15-year-old of 2 years ago, but a young woman with steel in her spine. "Mary?" her mother gasped. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Denver." "I came back when I heard—" Mary walked down the aisle, eyes fixed on Clara. "I couldn't let this happen, not when it's my fault." "Miss Hensley," Hartley began, but Mary ignored him. "Reverend Whitmore tried to force himself on me," she said clearly. "In the vestry, after evening service, Mrs. Whitmore stopped him, saved me. And yes, they fought about it. Yes, he fell. But it wasn't murder. It was—" Her voice wavered, strengthened. "It was justice." The church erupted, Matthew shouting about lies and conspiracies, Mrs. Hensley weeping, men arguing. Through it all, Clara kept her eyes on Mary, trying to convey without words her gratitude and sorrow that the girl had been forced to reveal her shame. "It doesn't matter," Matthew finally roared above the noise. "She confessed, in writing. A confession obtained under duress," a new voice said. Everyone turned to see a well-dressed older woman entering the church, which any competent lawyer would have thrown out. "Who are you?" Coleman demanded. "Margaret Sharp, attorney at law." The woman smiled thinly. "One of the few female lawyers in the territory, which is why I suspect Mrs. Whitmore didn't know to seek my help." She looked at Clara. "Your sister sent me, said you might need someone who understands that the law isn't always the same as justice." "My sister?" Clara's voice came out strangled. "Catherine Hughes. Received a very concerning letter from you some weeks ago. Took her some time to find me and convince me to travel here, but—" Sharp surveyed the assembled crowd with cool professionalism. "It seems we arrived just in time." What followed was a masterclass in legal maneuvering. Margaret Sharp systematically dismantled Matthew's case, highlighting the lack of physical evidence, the biased witnesses, the confession obtained without legal counsel present. When Matthew tried to argue, she produced a folder of her own. "Interesting thing about the Whitmore brothers," she said conversationally. "Both men of God, both with histories of, let's call them complaints. Young women in their congregations who suddenly left town. Families paid to stay quiet." She met Matthew's now pale face. "Did you really think your missionary work in China was voluntary? Or were you perhaps encouraged to leave the country after that incident in St. Louis? You can't prove—" "I don't need to prove anything, but I wonder how your current congregation would feel knowing about these allegations." Sharp smiled like a shark. "Perhaps we should let sleeping dogs lie. Reverend, your brother is dead. Nothing will bring him back, and pursuing this will only bring more pain to everyone, including you." Matthew looked around the room, saw the shifting expressions, the doubt creeping in. Even his lawyer, Hartley, seemed uncomfortable. "This isn't over," he said finally, but the fight had gone out of him. "Yes," Sharp said firmly. "It is." The rest was anticlimax. Matthew withdrew his petition. Sheriff Coleman, looking relieved, tore up Clara's confession. The crowd dispersed, muttering and whispering, but no longer baying for blood. Clara found herself standing outside the church, hardly daring to believe it was over. Elias pulled her against him, and she felt him shaking. "Don't ever," he said roughly. "Do something that stupid again?" "I won't," she promised. "I won't have to." Margaret Sharp approached, removing her gloves with practical efficiency. "Your sister will be pleased. She was quite insistent I help you." She studied them both with knowing eyes. "I take it you won't be returning to Kansas?" "No, this is home now." "Good. The frontier needs women with backbone." She handed Clara a card. "If you have any more legal troubles, don't hesitate to write. And Clara, that confession was brave but foolish. Next time, get a lawyer first." As Sharp's carriage rolled away, Mary Hensley appeared, her mother hovering anxiously behind. "Thank you," Clara said simply. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." Mary's chin lifted. "You saved me. Least I could do was tell the truth." Still, that took courage. Mary smiled sadly. I learned from you. Sometimes the only way forward is through. As the Hensleys departed, Clara and Elias stood alone before the church, the building that had housed so much pain, so many lies, so much judgment. Burn it down, Elias suggested, only half joking. Tempting, but no. Clara took his hand. Let them have their church. We have something better. What's that? Truth, love, freedom. She smiled up at him. Each other. They walked back to their cabin as the sun set behind the mountains. Tomorrow there would be new challenges. The town's judgment hadn't vanished, only retreated. Matthew might return. The past might resurface in other ways. But tonight, Clara Whitmore was free. Free of lies, free of secrets, free of the crushing weight of pretense. She'd faced her demons in full daylight and survived. As they reached their door, scarred still from bullets but standing strong, Elias swept her into his arms. What are you doing? Carrying you over the threshold, properly this time. We're not married. Details. He grinned, and she saw the wild joy in him. The relief. Marry me? What? You heard me? Margaret Sharp's a lawyer. Bet she knows a judge who'll marry a mixed-blood mountain man and a widow with a past. Clara laughed, the sound bright as spring water. Elias Crow, is that a proposal? It's a promise. He set her down gently, cupped her face in his scarred hands. Marry me, Clara. Let them all choke on their disapproval. Be my wife in truth, not just in heart. She thought of all the reasons to say no, all the problems it would cause, all the judgment it would bring. Then she thought of winter nights by the fire, summer mornings in his arms, a life lived honestly, without apology or shame. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, there on their bullet-scarred doorstep. And Clara felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She was no longer the widow Whitmore, trapped in black crepe and bitter memories. She was Clara, loved, free, and finally, truly alive. The letter from Margaret Sharp arrived 2 weeks after the confrontation at the church. True to her word. She'd found a judge willing to perform the marriage, Judge Benjamin Waters in Creekside, a day's ride through the mountains. More importantly, he was known for his fairness and his disregard for conventional prejudices. Next Tuesday, Clara read aloud. He can see us Tuesday afternoon. Elias nodded, but she caught the flicker of something in his eyes. Doubt? Fear? Second thoughts? She asked quietly. Never. He pulled her against him. Just thinking how different this is from what you must have imagined. No church wedding, no white dress, no family to witness. Clara thought of her first wedding, the elaborate ceremony, the congregation packed with Thomas's admirers, her mother weeping with joy while Clara felt only dread, the white dress that had felt like a shroud. I had all that once, she said. Look where it led. She turned in his arms to face him. This, us, it's better, truer. But as Tuesday approached, challenges mounted. Clara needed supplies from town, but the merchants who would grudgingly sell to the scandalous widow balked at outfitting a bride, especially this bride, Mrs. Henley turned her back when Clara entered the general store. The seamstress claimed to be too busy to alter Clara's one good dress. Let them rot, Elias growled when Clara returned empty-handed. We don't need their approval or their goods. That evening, a knock came at their door. Clara opened it to find Mary Hensley, arms full of fabric. My mother would perish if she knew, the girl said quickly. But I thought, that is, I have cloth I've been saving, sky blue silk. If you'd like, I could help you make something. Clara's throat tightened. Mary, I couldn't. Please. Mary's eyes were earnest. Let me do something good for once. Something that brings joy instead of pain. Over the next 3 days, the two women worked together while Elias made himself scarce, hunting and preparing for the journey. Mary proved skilled with a needle, and the dress that emerged was simple but beautiful, blue as mountain lakes, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. You look like yourself, Mary said when Clara tried it on. Not like someone trying to be what others expect. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Elias had already loaded their wagon with supplies for the journey. Clara packed carefully, the blue dress wrapped in tissue, her few precious belongings, the poetry book Elias had given her. She left the black widow's weeds hanging on their peg. But as they prepared to leave, riders appeared on the road. Clara's heart sank as she recognized Sheriff Coleman leading a group of townsmen. Going somewhere? Coleman's tone was neutral, but his hand rested on his gun. Creekside. Elias answered evenly. Personal business. Wouldn't be running off to get married, would you? Jake Morrison pushed his horse forward, face ugly with anticipation. Some folks think that'd be a step too far. Widow taking up with her savage lover is one thing, making it legal. It's no concern of yours. Clara said, everything in this valley concerns us. Another man called out, bad enough you're living in sin. Now you want to contaminate the institution of marriage? Like your brother contaminated it? Clara's temper flared. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, how many bruises did your wife hide last month? How many times did she claim to be clumsy? Morrison's face darkened. You shut your mouth. Enough. Coleman raised a hand. Clara, Elias, I can't stop you leaving, but I can't guarantee safe passage either. These men have concerns. These men have hate, Elias corrected, and too much time on their hands. Maybe. Coleman's expression was troubled. But they also have numbers and determination. You sure you want to do this? Clara looked at the assembled men, farmers, merchants, laborers, men who'd never questioned the order of things, never doubted their right to dictate how others lived. Men like Thomas, in their way, smaller, pettier, but just as certain of their righteousness. Yes, she said firmly. We're sure. Then God help you both. The ride to Creekside was tense. Clara kept expecting pursuit, but the road remained empty behind them. Perhaps Coleman had convinced the others to let them go. Perhaps they were planning something else. She tried to push away fear and focus on joy. She was marrying Elias. Whatever else happened, they would face it as husband and wife. Creekside proved larger than Pine Ridge, with actual streets and a proper courthouse. Judge Waters was a small, round man with kind eyes that sharpened when he looked at them. Miss Sharp wrote of your situation. He said without preamble, I want to be clear. I'll perform this marriage because I believe the law should apply equally to all, but you understand the challenges you'll face? We understand, Elias said. Good. Waters studied them both. I've married couples for 30 years, seen matches made for money, convenience, desperation, but occasionally, rarely, I see something else, something worth protecting. He smiled. I see that here. The ceremony was brief, witnessed by Waters' clerk and a cleaning woman pulled from the hallway. Clara wore her blue dress and carried wildflowers Elias had picked along the road. When Waters pronounced them married, Elias kissed her with a tenderness that made the clerk blush and the cleaning woman dab her eyes. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Crow, Waters said, signing the certificate with a flourish. May you find more happiness than hardship. They spent their wedding night in Creekside's small hotel. The proprietor looked askance at Elias, but took their money readily enough. In their room, with its brass bed and clean sheets, Clara felt suddenly shy. We've been living as married for months, she said, laughing at herself. Why am I nervous now? Because now it's real. Elias unpinned her hair with careful fingers. Now you're truly mine, and I'm yours, in the eyes of law and God and everyone else be damned. Do you believe in God? Clara asked suddenly. After everything? I believe in this. He kissed her throat, her shoulder, the pulse at her wrist. In us. If that's God, then yes. Later, as they lay entwined, Clara traced the scars on his chest, each one a story of survival, of refusing to break. She'd earned her own scars, invisible but just as real. No regrets? Elias asked. Only that it took so long to find you. They returned to Pine Ridge the next evening, traveling carefully, alert for trouble, The cabin stood intact, but something was different. As they approached, Clara saw what had changed. Their door, scarred by bullets from the winter's siege, had been painted. Red paint, crudely splashed, spelling out a single word: shame. Subtle, Elias observed dryly. Inside, they found more vandalism. Furniture overturned, food stores scattered. Their bed. Clara turned away from what had been done to their bed. "We'll clean it," Elias said, pulling her against him. "Replace what needs replacing. They're just things." But it was more than things, and they both knew it. This was a message. The town's judgment made manifest. "We know what you've done," the destruction said. "We're watching." They spent the night cleaning, burning what couldn't be salvaged, making their home theirs again. As dawn broke, Clara stood in the doorway, exhausted but determined. "I won't let them drive us out," she said. "I know." Elias wrapped his arms around her from behind. "My fierce wife." Wife. The word sent warmth through her despite everything. Over the following days, they settled back into routine, but carefully, watchfully. Elias reinforced the shutters, set trip lines along the forest paths. Clara practiced shooting until her aim was deadly true. They were preparing for siege. It came on a Sunday, with terrible irony. Clara was tending the garden plot she'd cleared when she heard horses. Many horses, moving fast. She ran for the cabin, but they were already surrounding it. 20 men, maybe more. Some she recognized from Pine Ridge. Others were strangers. Elias emerged, rifle in hand but not raised. "Gentlemen, we'll give you one chance." Jake Morrison called out. He seemed to have elected himself leader. "Annul this ungodly marriage. The woman goes back to town, takes up decent work. You disappear. Everyone goes their separate ways. And if we refuse..." Clara stepped beside Elias, her own rifle ready. "Then we enforce God's law ourselves." Morrison smiled coldly. "The sheriff can't protect you out here. No one can." "God's law." Clara laughed bitterly. "Where was God's law when Thomas Whitmore beat his wife? When he tried to force himself on a child? You invoke God only when it suits your prejudices." "Careful, woman. You're in enough trouble." The shot came from the forest. Morrison's hat flew off. A neat hole punched through the crown. Everyone froze. "The next one won't miss." The voice came from the trees. Then another from a different direction. 20 against 2 ain't sporting odds." Men emerged from the forest. Clara recognized some. The old hermit Samuel Hutchins who'd sold her the cabin. A few trappers who traded with Elias. Even Doc Garrett from town. But there were others too. Women, she realized with shock. The doctor's wife. The schoolteacher everyone whispered about. Mrs. Chen from the laundry, whose husband had died last winter. "Seems you're not the only folks who can form a mob," Doc Garrett said mildly, his hunting rifle steady. "Difference is, we're not here to terrorize innocent people." "Innocent?" Morrison sputtered. "They're living in sin. They're legally married." Margaret Sharp rode into view. Because of course she was there. The woman had timing like a theater performer. "I have the certificate right here, properly witnessed and filed. Any action against them is action against the law itself. Man's law is the only law that matters in this country." Sharp cut him off. "Unless you're planning to abandon civilization entirely, live like the savages you claim to despise." The standoff stretched taut. Clara counted their defenders, maybe a dozen, but well-positioned and clearly prepared to fight. She wondered how this had been arranged. Who had spread the word? Then Mary Hensley stepped out of the cabin behind them, and Clara understood. The girl had been busy with more than sewing. "You should go," Sheriff Coleman said, and Clara startled. She hadn't seen him among their defenders. "All of you." He addressed Morrison's mob. "Before this gets bloody, you're taking their side." Morrison's voice cracked with disbelief. "I'm taking the law's side. They're married legal. They're harming no one. You're the ones disturbing the peace." Coleman's face was grim. "Go home. Find better uses for your Christian charity." For a moment, Clara thought violence would erupt despite everything. Then Morrison wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You can't protect them forever? Don't have to," Doc Garrett called after him. "Just long enough for fools to come to their senses." The mob retreated, casting dark looks and darker threats. Only when they were gone did Clara realize she was shaking. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. Don't thank us yet. Mrs. Chen said pragmatically. "They'll be back. Men like that always come back." "Then we'll be ready," Mary said firmly. "All of us who've been silenced, ignored, pushed aside, will be ready." As their unexpected allies dispersed, promising to stay watchful, Clara and Elias were left alone with the magnitude of what had happened. "We have friends," Clara said wonderingly. I thought we were alone." "No one's alone," Elias said. "Just takes the right circumstances to learn it." That night, as they lay in their salvaged bed, Clara thought about community. She'd lost the community of the church, with its rigid rules and crushing judgments. But in its place, something else was growing. A community of outsiders, of survivors, of those who understood that sometimes the only law worth following was the law of love and mutual aid. "Are you happy?" Elias asked in the darkness. Truly, Clara considered, their life was hard, uncertain, threatened by violence and prejudice. They might never be fully accepted, never live without looking over their shoulders. But she was free, free to love, to choose, to defend what mattered, free to be herself, scars and all. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "Are you? More than I ever thought possible." Outside, an owl called, and its mate answered. The night was full of small sounds, wind in the pines, the stream murmuring, life continuing despite human struggles. Clara closed her eyes and slept, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, she wouldn't face it alone. They'd won this battle. But the war continued. Morrison and his ilk wouldn't give up easily. There would be more confrontations, more threats, more attempts to tear apart what they'd built. But there would also be more allies, more voices raised in support, more people willing to stand against injustice, even at cost to themselves. Change came slowly to places like Pine Ridge, but it came, one brave soul at a time, and Clara Crow, nee Whitmore, survivor and fighter and beloved wife, would be part of that change. The painted word on their door, shame, remained visible despite scrubbing. But Clara no longer saw it as an accusation. It was a reminder. They'd tried to shame her for surviving, for choosing love, for refusing to disappear. She'd wear their shame like armor, transform it into strength. Let them come. She was ready. The morning sickness began in late September, when the aspens turned gold on the mountainsides. Clara knelt by the stream, retching, while Elias held her hair back with gentle hands. "Third day in a row," he observed quietly. Clara rinsed her mouth, mind calculating dates. Her monthly courses, never regular since Thomas's death, had been absent for 2 months now. She'd attributed it to strain, to the confrontations of summer, but this, "I might be with child." The words hung in the crisp morning air. Elias went very still beside her. "You're not pleased," Clara said, reading his silence. "I'm terrified." He helped her stand, hands trembling slightly. "What kind of world would we bring a child into? Mixed blood, born to parents the town already hates. Born to parents who love each other." Clara interrupted. "Who'll protect them, teach them, show them how to be strong? Strength isn't always enough. No, but it's a start." By November, her condition was unmistakable. Her body, always slender, began to round. Her breasts grew tender. And with the physical changes came a fierce protectiveness she'd never experienced before. Doc Garrett confirmed it during a clandestine visit to their cabin. "About 4 months along, I'd say, everything seems normal." He packed his instruments carefully. "You'll need proper care as you get closer to term. I'm willing, but it might be safer to go elsewhere. Denver, perhaps?" "No." Clara's hand went to her belly. "This child will be born here, in our home. The town won't take kindly to it. Bad enough you married him. But a child. Let them be unkind. We've survived worse. But as winter deepened, Clara began to understand Elias's fear. The harassment, which had died down after the summer confrontation, began again. Dead animals left at their door. Their water source mysteriously fouled, forcing them to haul water from farther away. One morning, they woke to find a tiny coffin carved from wood on their porch. "Cowards," Elias spat, throwing it into the fire. But Clara saw how his hands shook, how he watched the forest with new intensity. She started her journal that night, writing by candlelight while Elias slept fitfully beside her. December 3rd, 1884. My child, if you ever read this, know that you were wanted. Despite everything, the fear, the hatred surrounding us, the uncertainty of our future, you were desperately wanted. Your father watches me constantly now, as if I might shatter. He doesn't understand that carrying you has made me stronger. The entries became her refuge. She wrote about her childhood in Kansas, about meeting Thomas and the slow descent into nightmare, about finding Elias and discovering what love actually meant. But mostly, she wrote about hope. Your father taught me to shoot today with my belly in the way. Had to adjust my stance. He's so patient, so careful with me. I see him sometimes, staring at nothing. And I know he's seeing all the ways this could go wrong. But then he feels you move under his palm. And his face. Oh, little one. I wish you could see how he glows. Christmas passed quietly. They'd expected trouble but found instead small gifts on their porch. Preserved fruit from Mrs. Chen. Knitted baby clothes with no note but in Mary Hensley's distinctive pattern. Even a cradle that could only have come from Samuel Hutchins's skilled hands. "We're not as alone as they want us to think," Clara said, running her hands over the smooth wood. "No," Elias agreed. "But allies in shadow aren't the same as acceptance in daylight." January brought blizzards and isolation. Clara grew heavy, movement slow. She could no longer make the trek to town, relying on Elias for everything beyond their cabin. He hunted, hauled water, kept them alive while she nested, preparing clothes from their worn garments. Padding the cradle with fox fur Elias had been saving. It was during one of his hunting trips that Jake Morrison came. Clara heard the horses before she saw them. 3 men. Morrison and 2 others she didn't recognize. She barred the door, checked the rifle, and waited. "Open up, Mrs. Crow." Morrison's voice was falsely pleasant. "Just want to talk." "Talk from there." "Now, that's not neighborly. Cold day like this. State your business and go." A pause. Then, "Reverend Matthew Whitmore sends his regards." Clara's blood chilled. Thomas's brother. She'd thought him gone for good. He's established himself in Denver, quite influential now, still concerned about his brother's death, about the situation here. Morrison's voice dropped. "He's offering a solution. Money. Enough to set you up comfortable anywhere you choose. All you have to do is leave. Tonight. Alone. And Elias? The savage can fend for himself. Always has." "I see." Clara steadied her voice. "And if I refuse? Then things get unpleasant. For you. For him. For that bastard you're carrying." Red rage flooded through her. Clara yanked open the door. Rifle aimed at Morrison's chest. "Get off my land." Morrison didn't flinch. "Think about it. That half-breed brat will never be accepted. Never have a normal life. You're condemning an innocent child to misery for your own selfish—" The shot split the air. Morrison's horse reared as the bullet whined past his ear. "Next one goes through you," Clara said calmly. "Leave. Now." They left, but their words lingered like poison. That night, when Elias returned, she told him everything. His face went carefully blank, the expression he wore when fury ran too deep for showing. "Maybe they're right," Clara said into the silence. "Maybe we're selfish, bringing a child into this—" "Don't." Elias knelt before her, hands gentle on her swollen belly. "Don't let them poison this. Our child will have what neither of us did, parents who love them, who'll fight for them. who'll teach them their worth doesn't come from others' acceptance. But the world is changing. Slowly, but changing. By the time this one's grown, maybe it'll be different. Maybe they'll help make it different. He kissed her belly tenderly. Either way, they'll be ours. That's enough. Clara's labor began during a February blizzard. The pain started at dawn, mild at first, growing stronger as the day wore on. Elias wanted to fetch Doc Garrett, but the snow made travel impossible. "We're alone," he said, and Clara heard the fear he tried to hide. "No." She gripped his hand through a contraction. "We have each other. That's all we need." What followed was the longest night of both their lives. Clara labored by firelight while wind screamed around the cabin. Elias did what he could, keeping her warm, offering water, letting her crush his hands during the worst pains. Between contractions, she drifted, hearing her mother's voice warning about the curse of Eve, Thomas condemning her wickedness, Matthew promising damnation. But stronger than all those voices was Elias, murmuring encouragement, telling stories of warrior women from his mother's people, promising their child would know only love. As dawn broke, the storm exhausted itself, and as the first pale light touched the windows, their child entered the world. "A daughter," Elias breathed, cradling the tiny form with shaking hands. "Perfect, beautiful." Clara, exhausted beyond measure, could only smile as he placed the baby at her breast. The infant latched immediately, fierce with life, and Clara felt her heart expand beyond what she'd thought possible. "What shall we name her?" Elias asked. Clara thought of all they'd survived, all they'd yet to face, of the dawn breaking clean and pure after the storm. "Aurora," she said, "for the new light." "Aurora Crow." Elias tested the name, smiled. Strong name for a strong girl. They had 3 days of peace. 3 days of learning their daughter's cries, marveling at her tiny fingers, feeling like the only family in the world. Then Doc Garrett arrived, having fought through the drifts. "Heard the baby came," he said, checking both mother and child with professional efficiency. "Both healthy, good. But Clara," his face was grave. "Morrison's been talking, stirring folks up about the child, saying it's an abomination, that God will curse the valley for harboring such sin." "Let him talk," Clara said, Aurora sleeping peaceful in her arms. "It's beyond talk. There's a meeting tonight to decide what to do about the situation." Doc Garrett looked old suddenly. "I'll speak for you, others too, but you should prepare for the worst." After he left, Clara and Elias sat in silence, Aurora between them. "We could run," Elias said finally. "Take her somewhere they can't find us." "Where?" Clara asked. "Where in this country will a mixed-blood child with unmarried parents find peace? At least here. We have some allies. At least here. We can fight." "You can't fight. Not yet. Still recovering. Then you'll fight for us." She touched his face. "You've been fighting alone your whole life. Now you have us to fight for." That night, while the town debated their fate, Clara wrote in her journal, "Aurora, my dawn girl, they're deciding tonight whether you have a right to exist. Fools, as if their opinion matters to the mountains, to the streams, to the turning of the earth. You're here, you breathe, you cry, you live. That's the only truth that matters. Your father keeps watch at the window, rifle ready. He thinks I don't see the fear in him, but I do. He's not afraid for himself. He's afraid he can't protect us. Doesn't know yet that we'll protect each other. That's what family does. Whatever comes tomorrow, know this: you were born of love, into love, surrounded by love. They can't take that from you, no matter what their meeting decides." Near midnight, horses approached. Elias tensed, but Clara recognized Mary Hensley's voice calling out. "It's over," Mary said, once they'd let her in. She looked exhausted, but triumphant. The meeting, Sheriff Coleman shut it down, said anyone who threatened a baby wasn't fit to call themselves Christian. Mrs. Chen stood up, Said she'd been driven from 2 towns already and wouldn't see it happen to others. Even Reverend Blackwood spoke, said Christ himself was born an outcast. And Morrison? Elias asked. Left in fury, him and a few others. But most, Mary smiled. Most folks seemed ashamed, like they'd been caught up in something ugly and finally saw it clear. She peered at Aurora, sleeping through it all. May I? Clara passed her daughter to the girl who'd become a woman through shared trials. Mary held Aurora like spun gold, wonder on her face. She's beautiful, perfect. Mary looked up, tears in her eyes. She'll grow up free, Clara, free to be herself. We'll make sure of it. After Mary left, Clara and Elias sat watching their daughter sleep in the cradle Samuel Hutchins had made. The danger hadn't passed. Might never fully pass. Morrison and his ilk were still out there. Matthew Whitmore still plotted in Denver, and prejudice died hard in mountain towns. But tonight, their daughter slept safe. Tonight, they were together. Tonight was enough. No regrets? Elias asked, echo of a question from months before. Clara looked at him, scarred warrior, gentle father, the love she'd never expected to find. Looked at Aurora, perfect mix of both parents. Hope made flesh. Never, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in pristine white. Inside, the fire crackled, the baby sighed, and 2 souls who'd found each other against all odds held tight to their small, fierce happiness. Clara picked up her pen one last time that night. The world is hard, my daughter, but you are harder. You're mountain-born, storm-born, love-born. They'll try to shame you, diminish you, make you small. Don't let them. Stand tall like your father, fight fierce like your mother, and know always that you belong. To us, to this land, to yourself. This is my gift to you, Aurora, not wealth or position or easy acceptance, but truth, love, the knowledge that you were wanted, celebrated, protected from your first breath. Let them whisper. Let them judge. We'll be too busy living to notice. All my love. Your mother. Clara closed the journal and set down her pen. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, in their cabin by the mountains, the Crow family was complete. And that was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this tale from the Wild West, don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Elias's journey. Your feedback means everything to us.